Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pod TV Network, and where we're going to look today at medicine and science with Michael Patmos, who's board certified in internal medicine. And today we have a very special topic we're going to discuss is medicine and science, and a person you're all familiar with. His name is Donald Trump. Okay, and so the thing is, something very interesting happened, like last week, is that he appointed, or at least he nominated, the head of Health and Human Services, somebody that was highly credentialed with a big background in medical science, who's well esteemed, almost a Nobel Prize winner, and his name is Robert Kennedy. Nope, wrong. I just misled everybody. He's not. Instead, what he is, he's a environmental lawyer at best, and knows nothing about medicine, has no background whatsoever, but he's going to be heading Health and Human Services. Now, that's a good pick. That's like saying if you want a quarterback, you're going to bring somebody in who's 6'5", 380 pounds. That's a wonderful quarterback pick. Like not. So I don't know what the thinking was, why this guy got nominated. So I'm going to have to defer to our panel of experts who may be able to give us a better idea why you brought an environmental attorney at best to head Health and Human Services, which should be really the purview of somebody that has a medical or science background. So with that, we're going to bring in Michael Patmos, who is a medical doctor, okay, board certified in internal medicine, has been doing medical work for 40 years as opposed to being an environmental attorney. To my knowledge, he was not even on the short list for Donald. So we'll listen to Michael Patmos, and you can give us your opinion. Is this guy really your top pick in the country for head of Health and Human Services? So take it away, Dr. Patmos.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am Michael Patmos. I'm a board certified internal medicine physician. I also have added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology. So I am qualified to opine as an expert in the matters of infection control and internal medicine. And I've been in practice for nearly 44 years and have held faculty appointments at 3 different medical schools. So you've asked a great question, Trump 2.0, how does it impact health and science, and why is he going to nominate Kennedy for Secretary of Health and Human Services? Well, let me tell you the answer to the reason why he's nominating Kennedy for Secretary of Health and Human Services, because Trump and his political strategic team obviously have a very good data and a sense from a market research point of view on what kinds of subjects would motivate his base. And he based much of his campaign on the notion that there's this concept of medical freedom, that no one should ever force anybody to be vaccinated, that vaccines are dangerous and vaccines need to be studied, and there's all these harmful side effects. And basically, he recognized that the anti-vax misinformation, that anti-vax propaganda had traction with his base and with the American population. And he was able to leverage that. Robert F. Kennedy is the icon, the global champion of the anti-vax movement. And so Trump recognized that Kennedy had value as a political entity to mobilize votes. And that's exactly what happened. And it's all based on false information. Nothing Kennedy says is true. What to expect from nothing Kennedy says is true with respect to vaccination. He does, like most quacks, sprinkle in elements of truth about eating healthy. Nobody opposes that. Getting exercise. No one opposes that. So he uses those things to sound legitimate, but his core messaging is really anti-vax and anti-science. So what can we expect from Trump 2.0? Well, let's just go back and look at what Trump 1.0 did. By the way, I have to tell you, the election of Donald Trump, it's been 2 weeks now, has sent shockwaves around the world in the medical, public health, infectious disease, and infection control community. The entire world, I'm in contact with people all over the world, are shocked that the United States elected this man president again. They can't believe it. And infectious disease doctors all around the world are just dumbfounded by this incredibly horrible decision. So what will Trump 2.0 look like? Well, let's look at Trump 1.0. That'll give us a little sense. Trump mishandled COVID very badly. We know it's been very well documented when COVID first hit, he was advised by the infectious disease experts that this would be catastrophic and then he needed to shut things down, stop people coming into the United States, isolate, mask, and basically shut down the economy in order to prevent mass death. For the first couple of days, he kind of agreed. And then he realized about a week after, wait a second, this is going to hurt the economy and hurt my election chances. So he decided to change course. He threw out all the infectious disease experts. He didn't just marginalize them. He attacked them. He attacked their credibility and unleashed his dogs on them. And then he brought in of unqualified physicians to give him another strategy. And that was what resulted from that was the Great Barrington Declaration, which is written by three people, none of whom are licensed physicians, none of whom are infectious disease MDs. So they wrote this ridiculous policy, which has become the policy in the United States and around the world, which is to only vaccinate the elderly. And so after that came out, the vaccination rates for younger people for COVID fell off the table, and we know what happened. 1.2 million people died, 300,000 to 400,000 of whom died needlessly because they wouldn't get vaccinated. So Trump's handling of COVID in Trump 1.0 was catastrophic. More people, more Americans died of COVID than have died in combat in every war the United States has ever been in since the Revolutionary War. It is the single greatest cause of death in U.S. history is COVID. And it's because Trump didn't want to lose the election, which he lost anyway. And so he basically brought in some fake experts to give him another strategy to use to convince the American people not to worry about COVID. And he said repeatedly, if you look at the film American Pathogen, it will just go away. It'll all just go away. We're perfectly prepared for whatever happens. All of that was bull. They weren't prepared at all. He threw out the preparations and the pandemic planning, and he winged it with a bunch of unqualified doctors. And the results are clear: 1.2 million deaths. So what will Trump 2.0 look like? Well, as you noted, he's intending to appoint completely unqualified individual with no background at all in health or science. In fact, an anti-science person, completely ignorant in the field of science, Robert Kennedy Jr., who has been on the fringe, beyond the fringe for decades, with all kinds of wild ideas that, AIDS isn't caused by a virus, that, all sorts of things, that fluoridation in the water is bad for you, and, all kinds of, and that vaccines cause autism. So he's going to be in charge of Health and Human Services. And that will lead to probably other equally ridiculous choices, like who knows what role Dr. Ladapo will have. Some have suggested that he will likely be Surgeon General. Some have suggested that Dr. Bhattacharya, who's an economist, not a practicing physician with a license, he has no postgraduate medical education, could be in charge of NIH. NIH does biomedical research. Bhattacharya is an economist. Why would we be putting an economist in charge of biomedical research? And then others have been mentioned for various positions in the administration. I think you might see Dr. Peter McCullough with a prominent role, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Kuldorf, none of whom are infectious disease doctors. And these are non-infectious disease doctors in charge of health and specifically matters of infectious diseases. So what specifically can we look forward to? Well, vaccination rates will decline. Robert F. Kennedy has made it clear. He says there is no such thing as a safe and effective vaccine, and people believe him. His readers believe him. So we will see a decline in vaccination. We will also see, not just in terms of infectious disease, we'll also see an impact on care for women. They've already outlawed in many states, management of pregnancy and terminations and so forth. And women have already died as a result of not being able to have their pregnancies terminated. We've seen, essentially a complete ban on women's health procedures in Idaho, for example. We will see decrease in care for people in the LGBTQ plus community, their ostracization and their stigmatization will continue. They'll be less likely to get care for what issues they need. We'll see an adverse impact on gender medicine based upon this primitive notion that there's only you're either a male or a female. There's complete ignorance of intersex states and failure to realize that gender is not binary, it's a spectrum. And there are many patients who have, ambiguous genitalia, who have genitalia of one gender, but an identity, mentally and psychologically with another. They just completely ignore that. Those patients will be ostracized and not get the care they need. And their doctors will be threatened. Already in Texas, it's illegal to treat them. We will also see a decline in insurance coverage. They want to scale back, Medicaid coverage, which will mean more people will be uninsured, which means more people will have no care and end up in dire straits in the emergency room at great public expense. We will also we're going to see another pandemic, another epidemic. H5N1 is spreading. There's data now that it is spreading. And Mpox clade 1 is now in the United States. So, who knows what the next pathogen will be, but infections don't vote. Infectious diseases don't care who the president is. If you let down your guard, bacteria and viruses will come back, and they're going to come back. They're already coming back. We're already seeing resurgences around the world of infectious diseases due to the decline in vaccination. And we're going to see poor outcomes in vulnerable groups like unvaccinated children, unvaccinated adults, LGBTQ plus, gender disorder folks, women are all going to suffer adversely because of these policies. There is a reason why the World Health Organization named the anti-vax movement to its list of the top 10 biggest threats to global public health. Let me say it again. The World Health Organization said the anti-vax movement is one of the 10 greatest threats to public health globally. What are some of the other ones on the list other than the anti-vax movement? Well, war, famine, drought, climate change. So the anti-vax movement is right up there with war, famine, and drought as a threat to public health. Who's leading the effort for the anti-vax movement globally? Robert Kennedy. His organization, Children's Health Defense, is a global entity. They have influence all over the world. They're working all over the world to depress vaccination rates. He did so in Samoa and responsible for, several thousand deaths of children in Samoa. So there's a reason why the World Health Organization has said that the anti-vax movement is such a threat. Well, we just elected a man who's going to put the global head of the anti-vax movement in charge of health in the United States. I mean, what could go wrong? Where does that go wrong? I think that what we're going to see is catastrophe, really. Public health is going to deteriorate. Pandemics, infections, epidemics, infectious diseases, measles, mumps, chickenpox, rubella, diphtheria, polio, all are going to come back. With the climate change aspect, anybody with a brain knows climate is getting warmer. Dengue is is becoming increasingly more common in the United States. It used to only be found in the tropics, but much of the southern United States is becoming tropical. So now we're seeing dengue and Zika virus, and already cases of malaria. It won't be long before these tropical diseases become more prevalent in the United States. So I hate to be a bearer of bad news, but I think that Trump version 2.0 is going to bring public health catastrophe, not only to the United States, but around the world. And the faster that happens, the better, because his administration he's packing it full of incompetent people who are just obsequious sycophants. It's going to fall apart. The Trump version 2.0 is going to fall apart. At some point, it will implode when people see their loved ones, choking and breaking out in pustules and falling into a stupor. And then people will realize, oh my God, we made a mistake. And then that'll be the end of that. So I'm optimistic that in the long run, we will self-correct, but it's going to be very dark from a public health standpoint for the next few years. And that's my sad commentary for today.
Oh, that sounds really exciting, Rick. Yeah.
Kennedy is also one of several appointees who are morally reprehensible. You know, he has several nominees who are sexual assaulters, which, I mean, happens from time to Bill Clinton was pretty rapey himself, but you've got Matt Gaetz, and Kennedy kept a sex diary. And in 2001, it detailed encounters with 37 women, not his wife, ranging from flirtation to full-on humping. And they were in the middle of a divorce. Wife finds the sex diary, hangs herself. So you said several thousand people died of measles. It was 83 on Samoa, and half of them being children.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean,
38,000 died of measles in 2022, so I must have gotten a little confused.
But yeah, if you do the math on COVID, the minimum number of Americans who've died of COVID is 1.2 million. I think it's more like 1.4 million if you go off of excess mortality. 80% of them seniors, which some jerks will argue, well, they were old, which is bullshit. The average lifespan lost by somebody, actuarial lifespan lost by somebody who died of COVID is 10 years of life with denying kids their grandparents, denying grandparents. Just because you're old doesn't mean you deserve to die. Just because you're overweight doesn't mean you deserve to be killed by COVID.
And 20% of the people who died were not seniors. So, let's not forget about that 20%. 20% of 1.2 million people or 1.4 million people is a lot of people. That 20%, they were not elderly. They were not, expendable.
My question to you, Dr. Patmos, are there no qualified doctors in the United States of America that can actually hold the position to be head of Health and Human Services? And that because there are no qualified doctors, we have to choose a environmental lawyer to head Health and Human Services?
No, there are thousands of qualified physicians. If you go to the leading academic medical centers, Health and Human Services, first of all, infectious disease is the greatest killer of all, always has been, always will be. So that's why infectious disease ranks at the top. There are other, we have chronic diseases too, cancer, heart disease, but infectious disease, sorry to say, trumps all of them. And there are lots of experts all over the world, and indeed in the United States, at leading academic medical centers, professors of medicine, experts that are more than qualified to be, Secretary of Health. And he's just ignoring all and putting somebody in charge who has no qualifications at all. What could go wrong?
Okay. Well, remember, Trump ran on that people can't trust government.
Right.
Okay. So now that Robert F. Kennedy is in government leading our health sector, will he be proven correct that we can't trust government anymore with our health and that individuals should go see their doctors and not see anything that comes out of Washington, D.C.?
I'm no great fan of government, but what I can tell you is when you start telling the population over and over and over again that they can't trust the government, which that messaging comes right out of Russia, by the way, people begin to lose faith. It erodes confidence in all of our institutions, erodes confidence in the intelligence system, the Justice Department, public health infrastructure. That's really bad. If people have no trust and confidence, eroding trust in government is a tool that fascists use. That's what Mussolini did to help gain power in Italy in 1922, erode confidence in government. And I love when Kennedy says, the elites, we have to silence the elites. Can you tell me who is more of an elite, Robert, than the name Kennedy? He's private schools his whole life, Harvard. He is the elite. I don't know who he's talking about. He's not like a man of the people, a blue collar guy with a double wide, a Jeep and a six pack. This guy's he's a Kennedy. He is the elite.
Yeah, he actually went to University of Virginia Law School. I don't think he got into Harvard, which is kind of interesting. But here's a question from one of our viewers, and this is important because we have viewers not just in the United States, but around the world. What can we do to protect ourselves from the Trump 2.0?
Let's go back to the basics of how to be healthy. Robert Kennedy says he's going to teach us all how to be healthy. Well, I think doctors know a little bit more about this than he does. The first thing you do to be healthy is get vaccinated. Follow the CDC guidelines on who should be vaccinated. Vaccination is the single most effective public health measure ever in the history of humankind. More lives have been saved, more suffering and misery averted through vaccination than anything else human beings have ever done. Number one, get vaccinated. Number two, don't smoke. Number three, eat right. Number four, wear your seatbelts. Number five, lock up your handgun. And the rest of it is just healthy living. But the most important thing people can do to protect their health is get vaccinated. And that's what they want to suppress. So what's going to result is, if you depress vaccination, you will find out what life was like in the 1800s and 1700s. It's going to happen, and it won't take long. Bugs don't care who's the president. They'll come back, and they're already coming back. We're already seeing measles in the United States, hundreds of cases. So it's only a matter of time. Infection will win. The bacteria will win. And after a while, people will realize that they made an atrocious mistake. Now, one of my concerns is that they will try to suppress the data. They're already trying to suppress the data. They've banned the collection of COVID-related data in Missouri. You can't report COVID deaths. In Idaho, they've banned the vaccination. In Texas, they have outlawed educating people about COVID. The public health department can't educate you. So they will try to suppress the numbers. But when people look and they see their neighbors falling and into a stupor and choking and breaking out in pustules, people will start to realize, and it will just take a catastrophe to wake everybody up. Sooner or later, Trump 2.0 will crash. That program will crash the hard drive of the country.
So we could talk about, so RFK Jr. has zero experience in government.
Zero.
And so I looked up the current guys, Xavier Becerra. He was Attorney General of California for 4 years. That was Kamala Harris's old job. And before that, he was in Congress for 20 years. So he's a lawyer, not a doctor, but he's got a quarter century of experience with knowing how government functions. And I know that, MAGAs argue that, that's a disqualification, but that's ridiculous. You need to, I don't know how many people are in the Department of Health and Human Services, but you need to know how to run an organization.
You need two things. You need the management expertise and you need the medical expertise. I was not a fan of Xavier Becerra becoming Secretary of Health and Human Services because he's not a physician. I think really health and human services, health, you got to have a doctor. But so I wasn't a fan of his. But one thing I will say, he listens to the experts. He doesn't invent strategy, medical strategy. He asks the experts, what should we do about this? What should we do about that? He's an effective administrator and he understands government and he relies upon clinical expertise. Trump relies upon clinical expertise from fake experts. None of his experts are infectious disease doctors. None of them. Some of them have no license, no internship, no residency, no fellowship, have never practiced medicine, don't have medical staff privileges, and have made up resumes with false information. That's who his experts are. They're the bottom dwellers of medicine or unqualified. And that's who he's got in. That's who he's taking his advice from. Becerra, at least he asks real doctors.
Yeah,
we can look at Trump's last head of HHS, a guy named Alex Azar, a lawyer, I think. I don't think he had much experience. He's the guy who made the sweetheart deal with Epstein the first time around, that let Epstein off with a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm. I did review his curriculum vitae of Robert Kennedy. It seems to me he would be better suited in either an environmental protection agency or Department of the Interior. But he seems to be mismatch. He doesn't seem to be Health and Human Services. The guy has no background at all. So from a leadership and a management standpoint, I would say this is a very poor pick. In other words, I would no, he would not be on my list. I would not appoint him as health.
I have one more point about
EPA is a different
RFK.
story. Yeah, go on, Rick.
That, you know, one argument that's been used against women being president is that they're hormonal. Though, you know, the two candidates we've had for president have been, you know, postmenopausal. So, you know, but RFK is on a ton of what you could call supplemental testosterone. He's on steroids, basically. And if you've ever seen him working out, he's 70 years old and he's obviously on a ton of steroids. So if you know, do you really want a guy who might be volatile because of synthetic hormones running a department?
Yeah, but why should we attack the person? Why don't we attack his ability and his background? In other words, I'm not going to attack the person because, yeah, I looked at his background that he's got problems with women, he's had alcohol problems, he's got like a whole host of problems. I mean, the guy's a problem child, we would say.
The whole dead bear thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's a problem child, but that's one issue. But let's look at the more important issue, because you can have somebody who has a lot of problems, but yet still be very effective in their job. I don't think this guy has any background at all to be effective in his job, and that's the problem I'm having with it. Right?
If you look at his academic,
I would not. Dr. Patmos, you hired a lot of people. Would you hire this guy to be head of Health and Human Services? Would you hire me to be head of your medical association? I have no background in medicine whatsoever. I mean, that seems ridiculous, don't you think?
let me make an analogy. He has no educational background to enable him to understand these issues. You can't be a physicist unless you study physics. You can't be a pilot. You can't fly a 747 unless you've actually studied how to fly a plane. You can't be a neurosurgeon unless you've done a neurosurgery residency. You can't interpret and understand the medical literature unless you're trained in it. So he doesn't have the basic training to even comprehend the issues, number one. And number two, he's not honest. He wrote a paper it tried to be somewhat scientific, and it had to be retracted because it was intentionally misleading and false. So between the lack of qualifications in education and the integrity issues, he's the worst choice. Well, maybe there's even a worse choice, but he's got to be one of the worst choices, and it's going to implode. Trump's choices are so bad that there's just no way that his administration is going to be successful. I don't know how long the honeymoon will last before everything comes caving in on Trump 2.0, but it's going to cave in on him. And I think it will be the next epidemic. H5N1 might just do it because Robert Kennedy has no idea what to do with H5N1 if it goes wild, which it just might.
So, I mean, it already is going wild if you're a cow. Avian flu in California is wiping out 10 to 15% of California's dairy cows.
Yeah. So, and it's spreading.
The only thing I can think of that would keep Robert F. Kennedy in the position is he gets lucky. In other words, you can't beat luck. I mean, lucky means that there is no pandemic. There's no big decisions for him to make. There's nothing happens during the 4 years of office. But if anything did happen, you've got one of the most incompetent people that I've seen. When I'm saying incompetent not because he's a person, his background is incompetent. You can't hire a person like that into this position. And I know that because I've hired hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the companies that I own, and I go, this guy is not going to be a person I would hire for that position. If you said, hey, he's an environmental lawyer, he's going to be head of EPA, I'd have no problem with that. He has a big track record going after environmental deals. I mean, the guy seems to know that stuff, swim in that stuff. But Health and Human Services, no.
I think there's a lot of internal inconsistencies, on some aspects around environmental issues. I think, Kennedy has been right. I'm very much pro-environment. He's going to run headlong into other people in the Trump administration who just want to roll back, climate protections and don't understand. If you don't understand the impact of climate change, go scuba diving. You'll see it. All you have to do is just go look at the coral reefs around the world and see what's happening to them, and recognize that life in the ocean is entirely dependent upon health of the coral reef. You destroy the coral reef, marine life collapses.
As the Chinese say,
luck is huge with a presidential administration. Bill Clinton, incredibly lucky over his 8 years. There weren't that many crises except the ones he caused himself, and it gave him room to maneuver and do some good. He was the last president who balanced the budget and reduced the deficit. And then the next president is Bush, very unlucky with 9/11 and very not up to the task in many ways.
Yeah, what a surprise. But the surprise right now is we're out of time. So we do want to thank our Dr. Patmos, who's board certified in internal medicine, a more likely candidate, I think, for head of health and human services. That would put you way over Robert Kennedy, who's a nobody, and Rick Rosner, who's a member of the High IQ Society. And we'll see you next week on Medicine Science on the Pod TV network in the United States and worldwide. Take care. Bye-bye.